My favorite wide receiver sleeper right now, late round value, is Demarcus Robinson. 2.24 fantasy points per target, was the wide receiver 6 in that metric. Great efficiency because he was so lightly used until week 13. He scored a nice bomb touchdown, ultimately scored 15 and a half points that week. And ever since that span, he had 13 or more fantasy points in 5 straight games, scored a touchdown in 4 straight, was the wide receiver 12 from week 13 to week 18 when he was a starter, wide receiver 20 in fantasy points per game as well. Legitimately a wide receiver 1, though, in total fantasy points. And now you got Ben Skoranek gone. They drafted Jordan Whittington in round 6, and I'll never discount a Sean Payton round 6 receiver. I get it, but he, from everything I've read, is more so that kind of willing blocker, the guy that would more so fill in if something ever happens to Kupp or Puka, and not quite the field stretcher of Demarcus Robinson. So I think this guy has that potential to fill that Brandon Cooks role. We've seen 3 top 36 wide receivers in this offense. Plenty. They run 3 wide receiver sets at the highest clip in the league. I love Demarcus Robinson towards the end of drafts. That should be no surprise to anybody that's been watching these streams. My highest owned player so far this year. All righty, we are on the clock again. Ramondre, Kyler. I think Kyler makes some sense to stack up with Trey McBride. That makes it easy for us. Let's stack him up, and then we'll queue up a few guys. I'll get a few guys in the queue. Ramondre, DeAndre Hopkins. We already have a tight end, so maybe Najee, Jonathan Brooks, Jalen Warren. So I'll get these guys in the queue, and then that way I'll kind of let you know when we're ready to go. But your wide receiver pick, Zay Jones. Let's hear it.
These last couple picks roll perfectly into the point that I was going to make. I mean, Zay Jones fits perfectly into the rosters that I like to build. I love grabbing a tight end in that elite range, that Dalton Kincaid to George Kittle range. And Trey McBride's one of those guys that I just love to grab. I mean, I think he's going to have a breakout year. And I mean, obviously everyone's kind of on board that train, and we saw it towards the end of the season last year. But and also grabbing Kyler Murray is something I love doing. He's the cheapest proven talent with elite rushing upside. And I know Jaden Daniels is cheaper, but Kyler Murray's a proven talent. We've seen him produce in fantasy before. So Zay Jones just perfectly fits into those picks that I like to make in the early rounds with the rushing upside of Murray and the elite tight end at a relatively fair price, I believe, with Trey McBride going in the fourth round. So he fits perfectly into the rosters that I like to build. And then he's been a target earner when he was in Jacksonville in that wide receiver 2 role. I mean, Christian Kirk went down last season, week 13, pretty early in a game against Cincinnati. And in week 13, Zay Jones earned 8 targets. Week 14, he earned 14 targets. Week 15, 8 targets. Week 18, he missed week 16 and 17. Week 18, 9 targets for Zay Jones. So he's shown the ability to still earn targets as a wide receiver 2. And as of now, I expect him to be higher on the target totem pole than Michael Wilson or Greg Dortch. So in the wide receiver 2 role in an offense that I think is up and coming and I'm looking to invest in, especially with how I like to build my rosters in the early rounds, a free Zay Jones in one of the last 2 rounds of drafts, it just makes sense to me pretty frequently.
Absolutely, and perfectly timed because we are on the clock. I like going either of the Steelers running backs. We have Najee and Jalen up for grabs. Dak is there. We just took a QB, so I don't know that we need him, but this is a nice price tag on one of our favorite quarterbacks, and Zach Moss also there. Anybody in that realm intrigue you that I just shouted out?
I'm fine with either of the Steelers guys, but lean Warren.
You lean Warren. Oh, I just clicked on Najee as soon as you said Steeler with the timing coming down. I think that big body sets himself up for the touchdowns more than that Arthur Smith. Love the Steelers running backs. Great middle round values.
Exactly.
Indeed. Yeah. And I love your Zay Jones. Yes, absolutely. In terms of my next wide receiver sleeper, I'm going the rookie route because, again, we've talked about identifying that next Tank Dell, that next Puka, and oftentimes it is that rookie that not a lot of people expect a ton from, and then, boom, they have the talent, they get the role, and they just thrive. And I can see that being Javon Baker there in New England. The path to targets is pretty damn clear. Yes, Kendrick Bourne is there, and Demario Douglas, the team's leading receiver at 500 yards last year, is still on the roster. But, man, that is plenty of volume up for grabs. And at minimum, I think we could see Baker take that role over from Kendrick Bourne by midseason, but maybe by the end of training camp too. He said, certainly not lacking for confidence. I make people in wheelchairs stand up when asked what he's going to bring to the table. And I love that. He now has to back it up. Mayo even called him up. It's all talk till we see it. Let's see you do it, my guy, and we'll find out. But in 2023, he averaged 21.9 yards per catch, second in the FBS. He earned a 99.9 PFF grade on deep targets, hauling in 15 of 30 for 574 yards and 4 touchdowns. 21 of his receptions of 52 went for 20-plus yards, nearly half half of them, 80% of his catches went for a TD or a first down. I love that. All the reports so far out of Pat's camp are that he's positive and bouncing around and flying around. So I see eventually this guy taking over 17.5 yards per reception again. This guy is a huge deep threat with a cannon-armed rookie quarterback. They're trying to build that early chemistry. So that reminds me so much of that Tank Dell mold there with the CJ Stroud, Tank Dell kind of building that rapport. I see a lot of similarities there as soon as he can get onto the field. I'm a huge fan of Javon Baker. And now it's our pick. We're timing these up pretty well, Mo, at least, even though it's a little bit hectic. We're doing it well. I have Raheem Mostert, Jamison Williams, Cortland Sutton, and then Jaden Daniels is there if we want to complete that stack or hope he falls back to us.
I don't mind going JMO and then hoping Daniels falls back to us, and if not, grabbing Goff later.
All righty, perfect. That's exactly what I was going to recommend. I like Mostert, but you guys know how much I love going Jalen right here. There's a nice price tag on Mostert there, though, with only 2 running backs on the roster. Could have considered it. But yeah, I think we can find plenty of later running backs. Gus Edwards, our boy, in the next round or two. Chase Brown might be there. So plenty of guys. All right, Mo, who is your next wide receiver guy before we make our next piece? Your favorite late round steal at wide receiver after Zay Jones.
This is just like, this draft is playing perfectly into like the rosters that I like to build. I mean, Luke McCaffrey is just another guy that I like to work in because Jaden Daniels, I almost said Jaden McDaniels there, the Timberwolves player, but Jaden Daniels, the cheapest QB with truly elite rushing upside. And I mean, we just all know the fantasy advantage of having one of those guys with elite rushing upside. I mean, we've talked about it time and time again. Getting to 700 rushing yards is basically a lock for being a top 12 QB.
Mm-hmm.
And
15 to 16. Yep.
And I very much see Jaden Daniels, unless he goes down, getting to 700 rushing yards and playing well. So getting a cheap stack in Luke McCaffrey with Jaden Daniels is something that I love doing. And Luke McCaffrey, I'm just grabbing him just generally because there's such a clear path for him taking over the slot snaps either immediately or early on in the season. I would be shocked if it's immediately, but pretty quickly into the season, I wouldn't be shocked if he's the main slot guy in Washington. I mean, just looking at the depth chart that they have, it's Olamide Zaccheaus, the journeyman who's been on a bunch of different teams, Falcons and Eagles. We've got De'Ami Brown, a guy who I've never been a fan of and never has really been an impact in his time in Washington. And we've got Jamison Crowder, the old man veteran who isn't really going to make an impact in my opinion. So I just don't see a lot of competition for him to not get slots out or routes out of the slot. And then the second option in terms of the receivers in Washington is Jahan Dotson. And I'm not completely sold on him. I mean, we know he had a productive rookie season and had a bunch of touchdowns, but everyone was disappointed. I mean, he was that guy who was pegged to be this year 2 breakout. And maybe I'm just overlooking a little bit too much in terms of how he failed to live up to expectations last year. And maybe it's just a year 3 breakout for Dotson. I mean, obviously the offensive situation wasn't great last year for fantasy production out of wide receivers, but I'm not completely sold on Dotson. So I just think there's a lot of paths for him to earn targets in this offense.
Absolutely. I think all of it makes sense. I've been loading up on McCaffrey since we started talking about him. Also because I've been loading up on Jaden Daniels. We are on the clock. Sadly, Daniels did go, but Gus Edwards, my boy, is sitting there as a Singletary, Shaheed, and Zeke, probably the top guys I have queued up. Mike Williams is there, but I know you're not a fan.
Zeke or Singletary or Gus. I mean, they're all kind of like in the same bucket for me.
Yeah, I went Gus just because Zeke's ADP is right there in the next round, and I think there's a real chance he could fall to us, and we could just go back-to-back running backs. That would give us Kamara, Najee, Gus, and Zeke, and I would feel, for not drafting a running back till pick 67, I'd feel real good about that backfield for sure. A lot of volume, even though it's ugly volume. Volume's all that matter at the running back position. What is up, you fantasy wolf? Thanks so much for tuning in. If you haven't already, share your thoughts in the comments, check out some more videos, and join the newest Wolfpack by subscribing below.